Hello and welcome to Buffy and the Art of Story Season 7, a podcast that recaps one episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer at a time. Today I'm talking about Season 7, Episode 6, Him, where Dawn falls in love or under a love spell, and Buffy refuses to take her seriously until it's almost too late. I am Lisa M. Lilly, author of the Awakening Supernatural Thriller series and the Q.C. Davis crime novels, and of the Writing as a Second Career series of books for writers. Along with the recap of Him, today I'll talk about great examples of escalating conflict for Dawn between the major plot turns, challenges with character continuity, and a theme that never quite emerges in this episode, but that might relate to the season as a whole. As always, though, there'll be no spoilers except in the foreshadowing section at the end. Okay, let's dive into the Hellmouth. Him aired the first time on November 5th, 2002. It was written by Drew Z. Greenberg and directed by Michael Gershman. The opening conflict occurs at Xander's apartment. He opens the door. Buffy stands in the hallway with Spike. And Xander tells Spike that he can live in that small room over there that looks like a closet, but now it's a room. And he tells Spike he takes a shower first in the morning, and if Xander uses up all the hot water, that's just too bad. Then Xander turns to Buffy and says, "And I hate this plan." He looks back at Spike. "Are you keeping up, or do you need some kind of English to constant pain in my ass translation?" Because Spike has not moved, and neither has Buffy, and Buffy says, "Invitation?" Xander to Buffy again says, "Is there something more emphatic than hate? Can I revile this plan?" But he finally invites Spike in, still questioning why. Buffy tells Xander Spike can't stay in the Sunnydale High basement. It's making him crazy. Xander, though, thinks crazy basement guy is better than stalking Buffy guy. This whole opening is such a good example of exposition coming out through genuine conflict. Buffy has a very strong reason for wanting Spike to go live at Xander's, and Xander has a lot of strong reasons for disagreeing. And because of that, this information that reminds the audience what happened in the past and gives them context for the scene comes out naturally in the dialogue between Buffy and Xander. Dawn is there too, and she questions whether Buffy is starting up with Spike again. And Buffy says 1,000 times no, but she also says Spike is different. He has a soul now, and Dawn wonders what that really means. Uneasy about Spike being around. Buffy is not sure what the soul means, but promises that no one's attacking, and she cuts off and gasps and spins around because Spike lightly touched her arm above the elbow. So no matter what she says, clearly she's not entirely comfortable either. This is a great example of showing a character's emotions through their actions rather than having Buffy tell us that she's still underneath it all anxious about Spike. Spike apologizes right away. He wants to leave. He doesn't need to be there, but Buffy insists. Spike has already improved. He, quote, "stopped talking to invisible people," unquote. Other than that one incident in the car on the way over, she stops and tells him to just go to his closet. At 1 minute 38 seconds, Buffy and Dawn are sitting in the bleachers during football practice, talking. Apparently, Buffy's on a break from her job, and Dawn asks why Buffy is helping Spike and what Buffy feels about him. Buffy's not sure. Sometimes she thinks she can't stand Spike, but other times, and she trails off and then denies that she loves Spike, just says she has feelings for him. Dawn doesn't get any of it. And now she rattles off a less elegant exposition. She says Buffy can't stand him, yet they're secretly having sex. And Spike says he'll die for Buffy, but then he tries to rape her. It feels like such a casual reference to what Spike did. And probably Dawn and Buffy have had more in-depth conversations about that, but it feels like this offhand reference to something that is a very big deal, though perhaps this is what Dawn would say at the moment. Buffy points out that Spike knew how wrong it was what he did, and that's why he went and got a soul. And Dawn again says, well, what does a soul do? Xander had a soul that stood Anya up at the altar, quote, but now he says he still wants her, unquote. Dawn doesn't think it's the school basement making people crazy. Dawn raises some great questions here about what does having a soul mean that, spoiler alert, are not ever addressed again in this episode. Dawn goes into a rant about how she doesn't get why anyone bothers. She doesn't understand these relationships where everyone does these things. Buffy has to go to work and leaves Dawn ranting. Dawn then glances at the football field and spots one particular football player, and we get the story spark or inciting incident for the episode. It is somewhat before 10% through. We should see it before that point, and we do here at 3 minutes 18 seconds. A football player will later learn is RJ, pours water over his face from his water bottle. He puts on his Letterman jacket. Theme music plays, and Dawn is smitten, and she literally falls off the bleachers and lets out a squeak, and we cut to credits. So a little bit on the nose there with the falling for someone idea, which sets the tone for a lot of the episode. On return from the credits, Buffy and a demon that is trying to kill Anya fight, partly destroying Anya's apartment. Anya is crawling across the floor, yelling to the demon that maybe she's not even the right Anyanka. Buffy helps Anya up after killing the demon and comments on how D'Hoffryn decided to take Anya out after all. Remember, last episode, he let Anya live. So that's a nice way to allude to that. And Anya says he's not the head of vengeance demons for nothing. Anya thanks Buffy for the generous life-saving and asks her to leave. But Buffy tells Anya not to take herself out of the loop. Buffy doesn't want her friends out there alone. Bad things are happening. I really like this. It's a good way to show that Anya can be part of the group again, which might not have been clear last episode. It's nice to see Buffy making that effort to include Anya and let her know that she still considers Anya a friend, despite that they tried to kill each other last episode. Anya, apparently not wanting to seem too eager, says, well, I guess you guys could use my help. I mean, Willow's not very good with the practical strategizing, except when she's evil. And Dawn, she's not really good for anything. At 6 minutes 19 seconds, we cut to Dawn, who paces by the stairs. She's trying to work up the nerve to talk to RJ, who is over by the lockers, along with another football player and 2 cheerleaders. One of them is RJ's girlfriend. The other is on a crutch and saying she feels bad she let the squad down because apparently she got injured somehow and won't be able to cheer. The girlfriend tells her they'll find a replacement. All of them exchange looks when Dawn awkwardly tries to become part of the conversation, directing her comments to RJ only. She says that this teacher that RJ had before and they're both in class with now is a drag, but RJ says he likes that teacher, so she switches immediately to say she meant drag in a good way. The other football player argues with RJ about whether he can do what he needs to as a quarterback, and Dawn jumps in and says the quarterback is the most important member of the team. He is like the rudder that guides the ship. And everyone sort of looks at her, and RJ says, right. And he is sort of nice to Dawn here. The others, the girls and the other guy are smirking about her, and RJ is seemingly sympathetic that Dawn is so awkward. He offers to take the cheerleader's bag, the one who's on crutches, and she looks thrilled. The girlfriend glares, and RJ says something about they're all on the same team, and they walk away. And Dawn to herself comments that they're all on the same team. She's not. but she calls after them, "We'll talk later." In the next scene, Dawn, in the garage or maybe the attic, hunts through old boxes, and there's a quick cut to cheerleading tryouts. Dawn, wearing Buffy's old cheerleading uniform, tries out, and one of the girls comments, "Nice outfit." Dawn does this cringy cheer that she seems to have made up about RJ, and she falls at the end when she does a cartwheel. But the head cheerleader tells her that was very spirited. RJ looks pretty awkward and uncomfortable here, but he still doesn't seem like a terrible person. It feels like he is feeling awkward for Dawn. This scene with Dawn falling at the end reminded me of something that a writing podcast I listened to for a long time, the Journeyman Writer, said about conflict in your protagonist, which was that every solution should make things worse for the protagonist, and that a scene is basically conflict resolution, things get worse. I don't know that it has to be every scene, but this episode does this really well. Dawn has a conflict. She tries to talk to RJ. It doesn't go great, and everyone walks away, leaves her there. So it's a little bit worse for her. She feels a little embarrassed. She goes and gets that cheerleading uniform, kind of a solution, right? Goes and tries out, and things get so much worse because she does the cringy cheer and then she falls. And now we're going to a scene where Dawn is sobbing inside her room. Buffy calls to Dawn through the door, trying to comfort her. Dawn flings open the door and says, "RJ's never going to notice me now." And Buffy, really tone deaf, says, "From what you said, I'm sure he already noticed you. I mean, what with the falling and Dawn slams the door. Buffy calls through Spirit. "They said you were spirited, right?" Xander joins her. He's over there because he's avoiding Spike, and he offers to order pizza. That's what teens in a snit like. Dawn storms out of the room, not thrilled to be called a teen in a snit. Buffy sees her cheerleading uniform is cut up on the floor. And Xander says, "Remember when she used to have a crush on me? I miss the much cuter me crush." In the next scene, Dawn is lying on the bed. Buffy points out that Dawn shredded her cheerleading outfit. Dawn says she'll buy Buffy a new one. Buffy doesn't want that, but Xander tells her, "Let's not be hasty." Typical Xander humor about his high school fantasies about Buffy. I do feel, though, that Xander now is a little more making fun of his past self when he says those things, but I can see audience members reading that differently. Buffy tries to tell Dawn she'll feel better tomorrow, points out that Dawn doesn't even know RJ, but Dawn insists she knows his soul. Another reference to soul, and we'll get a few more, and that is that theme I mentioned that the episode alludes to, but that it doesn't ever directly deal with. Xander says it's the jacket. Something about the letter on it makes girls swoony. And he adds, "You can't pin on any old letter and have it work." Not that he tried. Dawn keeps insisting she's in love, and Buffy is super condescending. She believes that Dawn thinks it's real and that it seems real to her. And I kind of like Dawn's response, which is, "Know what? Maybe I don't want advice from the dysfunction queen." She tells Buffy she has no idea what real love is, and if she did, she wouldn't make fun of Dawn. From here on, I find Buffy really inconsistent with what I think of as her real character, because sure, it would be hard to take Dawn that seriously because she really didn't know who RJ was. And Buffy is, I think we established, like 7 years older than Dawn. But Buffy did fall for Angel. She was fairly smitten with him, or at least impressed with him, when he would just turn up acting cryptic, and they really did not have a whole lot of communication. Yes, Buffy wasn't sobbing over him after seeing him once or talking to him twice, but she was definitely intrigued, and I just feel like Buffy might remember that. Sure, she's contrasting it to what Dawn's going through and probably picking up on the superficial nature of it, though she doesn't know that Dawn's under a love spell yet. but I feel like Buffy would have some sympathy for Dawn, or at least would be better at not saying kind of the worst possible things like, oh, I know you think it's real. I'm sure they wanted Buffy-Dawn conflict here. You need it, or the story is not engaging at all. But this feels a little like a quick pass at Buffy-Dawn conflict without going a little bit deeper and having there be conflict, but Buffy still being in character. We're past the quarter mark of the episode, and around here we'll usually see that first major plot turn, and it is coming soon at 12 minutes 41 seconds. Dawn overhears that RJ's teammate, O'Donnell, the one who was at the lockers before, will now be the starting quarterback. RJ fumbled too many times. Dawn follows O'Donnell really angry and tells him it's not fair. They're walking down the stairs together. They stop on a landing, and he tells her that's the game. May the best man win. Dawn says no one is better than RJ. He tells her it's not up to her. And at 13 minutes 36 seconds, Dawn shoves him down a flight of stairs. This does fit as a first major plot turn. It comes from outside the protagonist, who is Dawn, because we will find out later Dawn is under a love spell. So this isn't Dawn making a real choice to do this. It is her propelled by the spell doing something. So it comes from outside of her that spins the story in a new direction, because this is going to make RJ really notice Dawn, make him grateful to Dawn. And it raises the stakes because Dawn has done something really awful and hurt another student purposely, showing what lengths she will go to and how much she is not herself, because nothing about Dawn suggests from the past that she would do something like this. The next scene is in Principal Wood's office. Buffy and Dawn are both there, and Dawn claims that O'Donnell stumbled and fell and suggests he might have said Dawn pushed him because he was embarrassed about being clumsy, especially when he's so popular and athletic. Principal Wood says it's not the first time he caught O'Donnell in a lie. He'll have to call the coach and give him the news. Buffy becomes suspicious when Dawn says, oh, at least the coach has RJ to take over. In the hallway, RJ sees Dawn, calls out to her. He heard about her being in Principal Wood's office about O'Donnell and says it sucks that she's in trouble. She says it's not a big deal and makes a Spanish Inquisition joke from Monty Python, which he either doesn't get or doesn't want to admit he gets. And she can't believe she said that. And he asks her about the accident and smiles and says, it sucks when these things just happen, quote, out of nowhere, unquote. And they exchange a look. He then asks her if she wants to hang out after practice. And of course, Dawn is thrilled. The scene cuts to the Bronze in the evening. Xander tells Buffy that Spike seems a little better, but asks, shouldn't having a soul mean you pick your towels up off the floor? The others don't think so. Xander notices that RJ is there. Buffy relays some of the fawning things Dawn said about him, and Willow says, quote, check out the fan club, unquote, referring to a girl they can only see from behind who is dancing with RJ. And now we are going to get a ton of slut shaming, which will continue through the episode. Xander, really gross, looking at the back of this girl, says, Daddy like. And Buffy says, what is that shirt made of? Paint? Willow's eyes widen as she realizes something, and she says, Buff. And Buffy says, I'm glad Donnie isn't here to see her precious boyfriend getting all thrusty with some slutbag hussy. The girl turns around, and it is Dawn. And Buffy says, oh. And Xander says, oh no, Daddy, no. When I was looking, I wasn't, oh God. And Willow says, right there with ya. Dawn comes off the dance floor, and Buffy now is really awful. She says to Dawn, do you have plans later, or are you just going to go down to the docks, wait for the fleet to come in? Dawn says, what? And Buffy says, "Where do I start with the bad? First, you told me you were going to the library. Second, you do not go out on a date without informing me first. Third, Anna Nicole Smith thinks you look tacky." And while I get that Buffy has a lot of strain on her trying to basically parent Dawn when she is a very young woman herself and she's the Slayer. So it's tough. I get her being angry, but I don't get Buffy's complete lack of remembering her own high school life. There was that sexy dance she did with Xander to make Angel jealous. And of course, she said she was at the library to go see Angel and told Giles she was at home. So she has done all these things, certainly worn clothes, very much like what Dawn is wearing. And yes, it's always different when you step into the parent role. But again, it just feels so over the top, and Buffy has no excuse yet. She is not under the love spell. And maybe I could have let this go because Buffy is worried about Dawn. She doesn't exactly have training in how to be a great mom, but she's going to say something really horrible now because Dawn asks something like, well, what does Buffy think? She's mom now? And Buffy agrees that she's not, but says she's glad mom is not there to see Dawn. This is just awful. She does realize it and apologize. And maybe if this were last season when Buffy was just in such a bad place emotionally, I could buy this outburst more, but it erases too all the progress Dawn and Buffy have made in terms of connecting. And I think we're supposed to see all this as, well, Dawn's under a spell and she's acting extreme. And there is something to that. But again, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more nuanced conflict between them. Dawn tells Buffy, and I kind of feel like yay for Dawn here, that she likes the way RJ makes her feel, and if that makes her a slut or whatever, she doesn't care. Buffy tells Dawn to go home, and the next scene, Dawn is walking by herself, and that is another very un-Buffy-like thing. In this town, telling her sister to go walk home alone feels very off. Thank you to everyone who is supporting the show on Patreon. There is a new episode there for you, a new bonus that compares this episode, Him, to the Love Spell episode, Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, where I explore more in depth how the episodes differ and why Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered is so much more engaging, largely because of the characters and which ones are involved in the spell and how it affects their relationships with one another. If you're not a patron yet and you would like to get access to extra bonus content, you can do that for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/Lisa M. Lilly. There are lots of back bonus episodes there for you. If you'd like to also get the Buffy and the Art of Story book for season 1, Writing Better Fiction by Watching Buffy, and get access to all the modules in my How to Plot Your Novel from Idea to First Draft course, you can sign up at the $5 level and you will get access to all of that. If you're at the $1 level already, you can listen to the first couple modules of the course at patreon.com/Lisa M. Lilly/shop for free and decide if you might want to take the entire course. Thank you once again to everyone offering support on Patreon, and that's at patreon.com/LISA, M as in Marie, LILLY. And of course, thank you to all of you for listening. RJ's girlfriend, Lori, catches up with Dawn and confronts her on a dark street. Dawn protests that she was just dancing with RJ, but ups the stakes by saying RJ dumped Lori. Lori starts a physical fight with Dawn. Buffy appears and breaks it up, so at least maybe she thought the better of sending Dawn off alone and went after her. Lori kicks Buffy's shin before she runs off and warns Dawn to stay away from RJ. The scene cuts to Principal Wood confronting RJ about not doing his own homework and tells him to stop getting young women to do it for him. So something has changed at Sunnydale High. Snyder was making Willow do homework for one of the athletes, and Principal Wood does not think that that is okay, even if they seemingly are doing it voluntarily. A point in the column of maybe Principal Wood is not evil, because we don't know one way or the other yet. As RJ leaves, Buffy calls him over to talk to him about how he treats girls, including Dawn. He argues it's not like that. He just gets along really well with girls. Right around halfway through the episode at 20 minutes 51 seconds, Buffy starts empathizing with the pressure he's under as the leader of the team and comments on how much he must work out. A nice subtle callback to Jenny Calendar in Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered. If you remember in the library, she came in after Xander did the love spell, and she started touching his shoulder and saying something about how he must work out. Buffy mentions how she's only a couple years out of high school herself. They're basically the same age, and she's just like him, but, quote, with the sexual experience and stuff, end quote, and she sends him back to class. We're going to see Buffy again make reference to how they are almost the same age, which I think is to try to avoid the ick factor of Buffy, who's essentially on the faculty coming on, or she is on the faculty coming on to this student. And for me, that does not avoid it. We're also at the midpoint reversal for the episode. In a really strong story, we see the protagonist make a major commitment to the quest or suffer a major reversal or both. This is an interesting episode for that because a reversal for Dawn does happen right here when Buffy falls under the love spell, because that is going to take the story to a place where Dawn feels she cannot compete with Buffy. A lot of terrible things are going to happen because of it, but Dawn is not there for the reversal. And that can work in a story, but it can also lead to a little confusion for the audience on who's the protagonist and who's not. I think it's pretty clear here that Dawn is the protagonist for the story as a whole. But if you have a story that isn't as clear, that can make things fuzzier. This midpoint also is interesting because it serves as a midpoint reversal for Buffy's subplot, which is about how to ideally help Dawn through this. In the beginning, despite being very condescending, she first wants to help Dawn, then she is worried about Dawn's behavior, and this is a major reversal for her because she's not going to be able to care about Dawn anymore in the way that she needs to, because now she will be obsessed with RJ herself. Dawn has a few moments that feel like major commitments were she not under a love spell, and they are kind of spread out in the episode. We had that pushing down the stairs. Later, she's going to lay on a railroad track. And while the plot structure roughly still works, I think that adds to why on first watch particularly, this episode really threw me because it felt very uneven. But the bigger reasons it doesn't work for me are emotional, because I don't care about RJ, and most of the characters, as I talk about more in the bonus episode, are not making any choices here. Buffy doesn't make a choice to fall under the spell. Dawn doesn't make a choice to push RJ down the stairs. They are being taken over by this spell. And stories, generally, the less choice characters have about what they do, the less power the story has, because we're not as emotionally invested when we don't get to root for them to make the right choices anymore. Buffy and Dawn now both are in a spot where they more or less aren't able to exercise their free will. As RJ leaves, the theme music plays and Buffy gazes after him and giggles, and we cut to a commercial. At 22 minutes 46 seconds, Dawn comes home. Buffy waits on the couch to talk to her and tells Dawn she checked out RJ. He's a good guy and she thinks he likes Dawn. Dawn wants to know everything, including intonation and facial expressions, which seemed very real. I remember having those kinds of conversations with my friends. Buffy now is really awful. She tells Dawn that RJ likes Dawn, but he might have said that Dawn came on just a little strong. And Dawn says, "Oh my God, I'm the pushy queen of Slut Town." So more slut shaming from the writers. Buffy tells her it's okay. She'll come out ahead of those other girls with Buffy looking out for her. At least now Buffy has the spell as an excuse for acting terribly toward her sister. At 24 minutes 19 seconds, Buffy calls RJ out of class, and the scenes now will intercut between Buffy and RJ and Dawn, who is wandering the halls looking for RJ. She just wants to look at him and says aloud to herself something about that's not being pushy. She can just look. Buffy takes RJ to an empty classroom. It's one of those with the window in the door, as a lot of classrooms have or used to have. And she talks about how Snyder used to get on her when she was in high school, empathizing with his struggles with Principal Wood. He thinks Wood is the worst and wishes someone would get Principal Wood off his back. Buffy kisses him. He says she's like a teacher, seemingly attracted by that. And Buffy says, not really. Again, probably trying to undercut that ick factor. And as they are kissing, Dawn looks through the window and sees that and is stricken and runs off. This is 26 minutes 36 seconds, and this could feel more like the major reversal for Dawn because she actually sees what's happening. Xander, wearing his construction hat, finds Dawn outside crying. He asks if it's about the guy in the jacket and should he go get Buffy, but Dawn never wants to see Buffy again. Xander is confused. He thought this was about the guy, and Dawn says it's about both of them. So one thing this episode does really well is to escalate the conflict throughout for Dawn. So not just at big plot turns, but almost every scene. We start pretty small. Dawn can't figure out how to talk to RJ. Then she's a little awkward and says awkward things and does escalating things to get his attention. First, that cheerleader tryout that goes really badly. Then she pushes the friend down the stairs, which is a lot of conflict. Really ramps up the stakes for her. Then RJ's girlfriend comes after her. There's a physical fight. Now Dawn is devastated seeing Buffy and RJ. So if you are writing and thinking, how do I get from one major plot turn to the other? If you plot the way I do, you may know those in advance. Think about what could escalate the conflict in between. That goes back to that conflict resolution. Things get worse. How can you make it worse? Xander goes off to look for Buffy and finds her. RJ is lying across some desks on his back. Buffy is on top of him, straddling him. The top of her dress is partly off. We can see her camisole. Her skirt is flared around them, and he still has his jeans on, so we don't see any flesh. I want to think Buffy and RJ did not actually have sex, but they definitely might have. And RJ says to Xander, "Hey guy, it's called knocking." Xander responds, "I'm sorry, it's just checkout time was an hour ago, and we were hoping to make up the bed. And also, it's a classroom, you chowderhead. Now get off the boy, Buffy, we're going home." He turns away, and the next scene is at the Summers' home. Buffy tells a sobbing Dawn that crying won't make RJ's love for Buffy go away. Xander, who probably figured this out in the previous scene, says it's a love spell. Willow and Anya are there too, and they both say they will do some research. So that first scene with Anya with Buffy saying, "Hey, don't stay out of the loop," is a great way to explain why Anya is here now. Buffy and Dawn insist they are not under spells. It's real. Buffy acts a lot like she did in Something Blue in season 4, that unawareness of being under spell. Dawn's under a spell, but she's not. And she says she tried to get Dawn to back off. What was she supposed to do? Lie to Dawn? And Dawn says she trusted Buffy and storms off, and Buffy starts feeling bad. Willow says love spells. People forget how dangerous they can be. And Xander says, hey, been there. And there is a quick flashback to Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, that scene where all the women were trying to come and kill Cordelia and Xander, and they called it a scavenger hunt when it was over. But Xander dreamily says, good times. This is a little bit of breaking of the history of Buffy for the joke, because in that episode, Xander heartily regretted doing that love spell. He realized how stupid he had been and how dangerous it was. But I'm mostly okay with this for the joke, because in this moment, Xander is not advocating for anyone to do love spells. Willow finds background about RJ on the internet. Xander remembers the older brother of RJ who used to pick on Xander, but it might be worth talking to him now. He and Spike go to RJ's house. Xander warned Spike not to let RJ's brother charm him. Lance was popular in high school. He was a football player. But when Lance answers the door, he's not looking very shiny or charismatic. He's still living at home with his parents, and he is wearing a pizza jacket. Xander and Lance talk about RJ. Xander says he knows a girl dating RJ and wants to know, is he a good guy? Lance confides that for a while he was worried about his younger brother. He was all into comic books and geek stuff, and he says no offense to Xander, and he wrote poetry. As Xander and Lance talk, Spike wanders around the room, and there is a bunch of figurines on a shelf, sort of like Precious Moments figurines. One of them is an angel, and Spike turns it around so it's facing the wall. I thought that was so funny, and it's such a small moment that I never noticed it before, but it feels very Spike-like. I'm assuming he does it because Angel, the vampire, he just doesn't want to think about Angel, but it might also relate to his feelings about having a soul. We saw him embracing that cross in a previous episode, and maybe the angel makes him uncomfortable. I love that it's this tiny moment that has layers. Lance says that RJ blossomed, and Xander asks if he knows why. And at 31 minutes, 42 seconds, Spike, who's been looking at photos, comments that Lance in one of them is wearing his brother's jacket, the Letterman jacket. And Lance says it's the other way around. He gave that jacket to RJ right before Lance got the job at the pizza barn. And he says the Letterman jacket came from their father, and their father proposed to their mom in it, and she was a former Miss Arkansas. This got me thinking about how the old Letterman jacket passed down works for both sons, but Buffy's cheerleading outfit passed down does not help Dawn. I wondered if that was intentional. Is it a social commentary on the difference in the genders? Or maybe the cheerleading outfit was just there to go along with that theme of passing things on. And after all, the cheerleading outfit didn't work so great for Buffy because she did not stay on the squad. Xander is ready to go now that they've figured everything out, but Lance wants them to stay and play air hockey, and his mother calls down to offer them snacks. A little bit of a Xander Giles flashback to when Xander lived in his parents' basement and his mother offered Giles a juice box. At the Summers house, Willow and Anya are getting frustrated with their research. Willow has tried all the anti-love spells she knows, and nothing is working. Though it's not clear how she could tell. I guess maybe she could just ask Dawn to talk about RJ. The doorbell rings, and it is RJ looking for Buffy. Willow says, Buffy's not here. Go away. RJ says, are you sure? And Anya says, no Buffy for you. Leave quickly now. We're at the 3/4 turn in the episode. This is the last major plot turn. And here it does, as it should, grow from the midpoint. where Buffy fell under the spell and take the story in another new direction. Because at 33 minutes 5 seconds, both Willow and Anya stare at RJ as he walks away and his theme music plays. They are falling under the spell too. And this happened because of that midpoint reversal where Buffy fell under his spell. That's why he came to the house. And it's a new direction because now everyone Dawn cares about, except Xander, will be competing for RJ. And we cut to Willow and Anya fighting about him. Willow says Anya doesn't even know him. Anya says, yes, I do. I looked into him and I saw his soul. So another soul reference. And Willow says he was walking away, so unless his soul was in his ass, Anya says, AJ is my best friend and my dearest darling. And Willow says, it's RJ. And what you were picking up on was his deep caring and devotion to me. Dawn and Buffy hear all of this and come downstairs, shocked. Buffy says, Willow, you're a gay woman, and he isn't. And Willow responds, this isn't about his physical presence, it's about his heart. Willow argues she loves RJ the most because she's willing to look past her sexual orientation to be with him. Anya says she would kill for him, and Willow points out Anya would kill for a chocolate bar. Buffy has an idea. She can kill. She's the Slayer. She will kill the principal. And this shows just how far Buffy has gone. So we have escalation for Buffy too, because through the series, killing a human has been a huge deal for Buffy. Willow is going to do magic, and Anya argues, what's Willow going to do? Make RJ into a girl? Which gives Willow an idea. And Dawn listens to all of this really distraught. It is a big escalation of the conflict for her because she is not seeing anything she can do to compete. I am really excited that this week, as I record this, I finished my major revision on my current novel, the 7th one in my QC Davis crime novel series, and sent it off to my first reader who felt it was working very well. So I'm still going to give it a rest for a few weeks so I can come back fresh and just see what else I might want to tweak in it. But it's really nice to have that done. I enjoy rewriting more than first drafting, but towards the end, I always hit this point where I just want to be done with this project. And the nice thing is that I can now turn to some of my nonfiction and hopefully get more done on that. If you would like to check out the QC Davis mystery/crime novel series, you can get the novella in the series free to try it out. And I figured this is a good episode to talk about it. In the novella, Quill is at a high school, and it even relates to the sports theme. So here is the description. It's called No Good Plays. After solving a crime but losing a friend, Chicago lawyer Quill C. Davis's plans for the summer are to have fun, catch up on her law practice, and enjoy time on her boyfriend's boat. But Detective Sergeant Beckwell, who helped Quill in the past, calls in a big favor. His son's high school basketball coach is dead, and he's afraid his son is somehow involved. Beckwell has it all planned. He gets Quill a volunteer job at the school. From there, he expects her to wheedle her way into the high school world and figure out what happened to the coach and, more important, what Beckwell's son knows about it. Quill fears the detective sergeant will expect her to cover up what she finds, but she feels for Beckwell, whose son has gone from confident, happy high school basketball star to a sullen, angry teenager who may want to quit playing altogether. She agrees to investigate, and Beckwell promises not to interfere no matter what she learns. But is it a promise he can keep? And can Quill find the killer before she becomes his next victim? You can check that out and find a link for how to get the book for free at lisalilly.com/no-good-plays. As the three women head out to compete for RJ's love, Buffy pauses to apologize to Dawn, saying Dawn will never get RJ. Dawn, alone and sad, agrees. Then we get a 4-square split screen that to me has the 70s show Charlie's Angels vibes. Willow is doing her spell to turn RJ into a woman. Buffy is in an SUV with a rocket launcher at her side. She's driving. Anya puts on a black knit hat outside a bank. And then Dawn is at some railroad tracks and she lies down on them and a train whistles. I am so sure that 4-square type of framing on the TV screen was used in that early Charlie's Angels series. But when I went and found the first episode on YouTube, they don't use it. I thought it was part of the opening sequence. So if anyone remembers if that was used there, did it eventually become part of the opening, or was it maybe a device that was used later? Please let me know. After that split screen of everyone going off to do their things, there's a commercial. We come back to Willow sitting on the porch casting her spell. Xander and Spike interrupt. And Willow explains she's showing who loves RJ the most. And Xander says, Will, honey, RJ's a guy. And Willow says, I did notice that, yeah. It's why I'm doing my spell, because, he doesn't have to be. Willow tells them what everyone else is doing other than Dawn. She doesn't know that. And includes that Buffy is going to kill Principal Wood. The scene cuts to Principal Wood. He's in his office. There's music playing. He's going through some paperwork, and he does not notice at all what's going on outside his window, which is Buffy setting up with a rocket launcher and aiming it. Wood's oblivious. Spike tackles Buffy. They fight outside the window. Xander and Spike chase Buffy, and they all end up at a sedan where Willow is doing another spell. It's a locator spell. So that is a very fun moment. I have to say, the first time I watched it, I didn't really appreciate the comedy of Buffy with a rocket launcher. I just found it all too goofy, but later watchings, I enjoyed it because I had a better sense that, hey, this is not supposed to be a serious episode. Apparently, the first time through, I still thought it should be by this point. We're now nearing the climax. We're at about 37 minutes, 30 seconds, and the sedan pulls up near those railroad tracks. The train whistle is blowing, and the four of them get out of the car. Buffy, Xander, Spike, and Willow. Buffy says, you realize that Anya's probably seducing RJ even as we speak. And Willow says, my God, you think so? And Buffy responds, well, I wouldn't put it past her. She's recently evil, And Willow says, well, so am I. Why should I miss out? Xander, though, is looking around, not being so focused on RJ, and the train whistles again, and he spots Dawn on the track. This galvanizes Buffy. She runs. The train is way ahead of her. She leaps onto it. Some really great action sequences as she leaps between cars, gets up on top, jumps off of the engine, barely in time to drag Dawn off the track. Dawn and Buffy argue about why Dawn did this. And this is what I think is the climax, because Dawn and Buffy need to have this confrontation and resolve it. And Buffy says, this is the plan. You're going to steal RJ by being trisected. Dawn says, what am I going to compete with you? You're older and hotter and have sex that's rough. As an aside, I'm like, did Buffy tell her that? Like, how does Dawn know that? But she goes on, and kill people. I don't have any of that stuff. But if I did this, then his whole life he'd know there was someone that loved him so much they'd give up their life, and it would be true forever. And Buffy says, my favorite line, possibly in all of Buffy, no guy is worth your life, not ever. Dawn points out, look what Buffy was willing to do. And Buffy, seeming very sincere here, says she'd give RJ to Dawn in a second if she could. That's how much Dawn is scaring her right now. Buffy admits she did want RJ, and she almost wavers and then says she might be under a spell. And Dawn says, I hear you. So they both recognize it here. The challenge with this as a climax is Dawn doesn't have any agency here, really, maybe a little bit. Buffy finds it because of her love for Dawn, and that makes her story have a stronger resolution because her subplot in dealing with Dawn, she encounters major conflicts and now overcomes them to save her sister, to genuinely say, I will give you RJ if I could, I would do it, and to recognize the spell. Dawn does make a little bit of progress in also seeing I'm under a spell. And you can have a protagonist who, because of circumstances, is extremely limited in the choices they can make and what they can do. And what you need to do in that circumstance is have the character do as much as they possibly can. And probably that is done here for Dawn, but it's a good example of she is so limited by this spell that it undercuts the story because, again, Dawn is not able to make a lot of choices here, where in contrast, Xander, as the protagonist in Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, was not himself under the spell. So he, throughout the episode, yes, he set in motion all these terrible things that could not easily be fixed, but he can make choices after that to try to deal with it, where Dawn is very limited in her range of options. The other thing is, while I just said that was the climax, we still have RJ out there in the jacket, and that still has to be dealt with. So this next part probably is part of the climax, but feels like it's part of the falling action where we resolve loose ends. RJ is walking outside in the dark with that cheerleader who's on the crutch. So he's probably schmoozing with her now. Maybe she's going to do his homework for him. And Xander and Spike ambush him and grab the jacket off of him. The scene cuts to the Summers home again, and they are burning the jacket in the fireplace. Xander says it's the smell of victory. Buffy says, Xander, be honest. You didn't, think about slipping that jacket on just a little bit? And Xander responds, I refuse to answer that on the grounds that it didn't fit. Anya comments on how they'll never know where the father got the jacket, and Xander says, welcome to the Hellmouth, where even outerwear isn't safe. This is a nice, subtle reference to the pilot episode, Welcome to the Hellmouth title, and of course that trying on the jacket, another reference to the love spell episode. I do feel overall, and I've mentioned this before, so maybe I'll stop now, but the writers, I think, got a little carried away with, we're going to make all these allusions to past episodes, which can be fun. I like the Welcome to the Hellmouth one. It makes sense that they would reference the previous love spell episode. It'd be weird if they didn't, as if the characters forgot. But sometimes I feel like they were having so much fun with doing that the actual plots of the current episodes or the characters suffered a little because everyone was being clever about the references. Buffy is sitting on the couch with Dawn and tells Dawn none of this was Dawn's fault. Dawn apologizes to Buffy for how she acted. She feels stupid that she did it all over a spell. And Buffy forgives her. I really needed Buffy to apologize as well. I'm sure at some point she did, and here and there she threw in an apology, but I needed a heartfelt apology from Buffy to Dawn because Buffy was horrible, as I noted, even before the spell took hold, but especially since it, and it's odd to me that it is played as if it is only Dawn who has to apologize. Buffy, after forgiving Dawn, says she should get ready to feel even stupider when it's not over a spell. Willow asks what Anya almost did for RJ. Anya hems and haws and claims she wrote a long love poem, but a news report comes onto the radio about a late-night bandit who held up a number of banks. Anya quickly shuts off the radio and offers to buy everyone ice cream. And that is the end of the episode. And that is it for my commentary other than the foreshadowing section. I hope you'll stick around for that, but if you don't, thank you again for listening. I hope you'll come back in 2 weeks for Season 7, Episode 7, Conversations with Dead People, where Buffy fights and is psychoanalyzed by a Sunnydale high school student turned vampire. Willow and Dawn are haunted by people they love, and we learn some disturbing things about Spike. We'll also have a special treat in that episode. Stephen Youngkin, the host of Wolfram and Cast, the Angel Retrospective podcast, will be joining me. And we're back for spoilers and foreshadowing. Xander's comment about crazy basement guy being better than stalking Buffy guy, nice foreshadowing of Spike, who will be out stalking women next episode. Anya's comment about Dawn, she says, and Dawn, she's not really good for anything, which is funny, but it's a little bit of what throws me about Dawn in this season. I feel like the writers zigzag around. On the one hand, we'll see Dawn, she's learning to stake vampires. In the next episode, she is suddenly going to know all these things about spells and magic ingredients. Later in the season, she'll have read a text in Sumerian. But we never see how and when Dawn learned these things. And there'll be other times when Dawn seems like she has no role or is no good at things. And Anya's comment fits with that view of Dawn. I suppose there was a hint at the end of last season where Dawn pulls out the sword and says to Buffy, "What do you think? I haven't been watching you." I just would have liked here and there something that would let us know that Dawn is working hard at all these things, so it doesn't feel like they just pull them out of nowhere when they need it. Oh, surprise, Dawn knows how to do a spell to cast out demons. Oh, surprise, Dawn reads Sumerian. Buffy's comment about she's glad Mom isn't there to see Dawn. I wonder if, given what Drew Goddard said last in the commentary on last episode about how he would get an outline and it might just have something like Spike Buffy scene, whether there was something in the outline the writer got that was have Buffy and Dawn fight and mention that Joyce is dead. Because next episode, Dawn is going to see Joyce. Joyce will give Dawn a message that Buffy is not going to be on Dawn's side at the end or is not going to choose Dawn. And I feel like that comment by Buffy was meant to remind us Joyce died and to create this Buffy-Dawn conflict so that when Joyce says that, maybe we believe it a little more. If that's true, I still don't think that's an excuse for that line, and I still don't think it fits Buffy's character, but maybe that's how that happened. Dawn questioning what does that even mean to have a soul is, I think, the biggest foreshadowing for a major arc in this season, which is about Spike with a soul and the first controlling Spike. Because neither the soul nor the chip in his head stops him from killing people when the first takes him over. And there will be a running issue over whether Spike can control himself, whether Buffy should let him live or he's too dangerous and she should kill him, whether he should be around the potentials when they show up. And that, I think, is the purpose of Dawn saying that. Spike getting a soul is a big thing. It clearly operates differently for him than Angel. But this foreshadows that next episode, that is going to come to the forefront and be a huge issue for the season. And it's probably there because it's something that the audience has been wondering about for 7 seasons. What does having a soul mean? Early in the series, it seemed pretty cut and dried. Angel having a soul or not was the difference between Angel good and Angel evil, but we've seen a lot of variations on those themes now. And as Dawn points out, just having a soul doesn't mean that people are going to always behave in an ideal way. And we have seen demons who presumably don't have souls who nonetheless kind of seem like good guys, like Spike's friend Clem. So this is an open question in the Buffyverse, and it's good to have some character articulate it. That is it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Come back in 2 weeks for Season 7, Episode 7, Conversations with Dead People, where Buffy, Dawn, and Willow talk to undead or dead people, or do they? And I will talk with Stephen Youngkin of Wolfram and Cast about the episode. You can find back episodes of Buffy and the Art of Story, as well as the Buffy and the Art of Story books and all my fiction at lisalilly.com. Music for this episode was written and performed by Robert Newcastle. Buffy and the Art of Story is a production of Spiny Woman LLC, copyright 2024. All rights reserved.